Our second reading, also from the New Testament, from the Gospel according to Matthew, beginning at chapter 22, verse 15. This continues the time near the end of Matthew's Gospel when Jesus is in Jerusalem for the Passover and is teaching and having encounters and being challenged by all kinds of people that he meets. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with the truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed and left him and went away. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Sometimes I am amazed that I dare to climb into a pulpit to offer a word on the gospel. It amazes me that anyone dares to do it. And that's because if you spend any time reading the Gospels, you notice something pretty quickly. You come face to face with the fact that religious professionals do not come off well. Not at all. Priests, scribes, elders, Pharisees, Sadducees, the whole long list of those who attempt to speak for God, they're all portrayed as lacking, with one notable exception. Take today's story. Though it's fall here in the southern tier of New York, it's spring in our gospel passage. In fact, it is the week leading up to the Passover, meaning that Jerusalem is filling with pilgrims who wish to celebrate the festival in the holy city. For Christians, we realize that this is Holy Week, the last week of Jesus' earthly ministry. It's only a few more days until Jesus is crucified. So of course, things are starting to heat up. Now remember with me what has happened over the past couple of days, beginning with Palm Sunday. Jesus has come into Jerusalem with crowds singing psalms and identifying him as the one on whom they are pinning their hopes. Is he the Messiah? Will he save them from oppression by the Roman government? Is he capable of toppling Caesar himself? Is he truly the prophet they have been waiting for? Jesus then performs one of the most controversial and shocking acts of his ministry. It's reported in every gospel. He strides into the temple, into the area where Roman coins are being exchanged for temple coins, the ones that you're allowed to bring in for sacrifices to be purchased. He knocks over the tables of the money changers. He chases them out, telling them they are turning his Father's house of prayer into a den of thieves. And then there's something about doves. Jesus knocks over the benches of those selling doves, a detail present in 3 of the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and John. Now, the purpose of a sacrifice is to make right the relationship between people and God. The offerings are described in Leviticus as penalty for sin. This is an ancient practice found in many cultures all over the world. And it persisted with God's covenant people, the people of Israel, right up until the temple was destroyed. They offered sacrifices right up until that point. For Jews, a lamb was required for a sacrifice. But Leviticus offers an alternative for those who can't afford a lamb, for the poor among God's people. The alternative is 2 doves. It's significant that Jesus chases away the dove sellers. If there's one thing we know about Jesus, it's that he's for the poor, unequivocally. No modifiers such as deserving poor. Jesus is for the poor. The fact that Jesus drives out the dove sellers points us to what he really believes is the heart of the problem in the temple. The poor are being exploited and harmed. They're being forced to choose each week whether they will feed themselves and their family or whether they will offer sacrifices to be on good terms with God. So on those weeks where they choose to feed their families, they have to live with the fact that they are not forgiven for their sins by what they believe. And on those weeks when they choose sacrifice and atonement, they risk their lives and health. Jesus demonstrates vividly his belief that there has to be a better way. Throughout the rest of the week, Jesus is teaching in the temple, and from his very first outing, the religious authorities show up. And now they are fired up by his shocking confrontation with the money changers and the dove sellers. They are determined to confront him, to trap him, to topple him. First, it's the chief priests of the temple and the elders. Then in our passage this morning, it's a rare alliance, the Herodians and the Pharisees. This is a very strange set of bedfellows here. First, the Herodians, they're the people in the camp of King Herod, probably his staff people, representatives, and they are carrying on Herod's continuous plan of government of the rich, by the rich, and for the rich. They band together with the Pharisees, the morally upright Pharisees, whose great concerns are things like ritual purity and who's worthy of sharing table fellowship. The only thing these two groups have in common is that they want to ensnare Jesus. The allies approach Jesus with soft, slippery words. Their first move is to flatter him. Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Their words ooze with insincerity. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? Paging Admiral Akbar, it's a trap! Which of course Jesus knows very well. And he calls them out on their playing acting, and he calls them a bunch of hypocrites. And then he calls for the coin used for the tax. He doesn't specify which tax, which he could by saying the poll tax or the tribute tax. He doesn't have to say which tax. Everyone knows this hated tax that he is talking about. It's a flat tax, which means that people of wealth, like the Pharisees and the Herodians, can pay it no problem. They won't even miss that money. A poor person, on the other hand, would have to work an entire day as a laborer out in the hot sun, maybe harvesting grapes, in order to earn that one coin. It's a denarius. And Jesus takes the denarius in his hand and he says, whose head is this? Whose image is on this coin? Do any of you happen to have a coin in your pocket or purse? I brought some with me today. Who's on your coins? Do you carry around the president we call the father of our country, who was probably elected the first president because he was such a good general? People thought a good general must be a good leader. Is it the one who wrote the Declaration of Independence, outlining the God-given freedoms of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, while at the same time keeping more than 100 slaves on his plantation? Is it the president who freed the slaves, but who then paid for his courage with his life? Is it the president who was confined to a wheelchair, but who brought this country out of the Great Depression, set people to work again, signed the Social Security Act? For citizens of the United States, the faces on our coins tell us which qualities we value in our leaders, and also, to a certain extent, which qualities we are willing to overlook. For citizens of Rome, the face on their coin told them to whom they owed specific acts of allegiance, such as the payment of the tribute or the toll tax. Whose image is on the denarius? The image is Caesar, and he's revered as a god by the Roman citizens. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, Jesus says. If you intend to use the Roman roads, if you hope to be protected by the Roman soldiers, if you want to do business in this Roman province, by all means, pay your taxes. But the mention of image is always going to remind Jesus' audience of a particular verse of Scripture, don't you think? From Genesis. So God created humankind in his image. The image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God made humans and continues to make them in his own image and likeness. Caesar's image may be on the coins carried around by the Herodians and the Pharisees, but the image of God is imprinted on every human heart. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. As it turns out, everything is God's. As another Presbyterian pastor wrote this week, the coins we give to Caesar or to Costco or to Amazon or to the electric company or to the church may not have God's image stamped on them, but they are nevertheless part of God's grand economy of abundant life. The Pharisees and the Herodians are amazed. They back off. They leave Jesus. They go away. They give up for the moment. Jesus seems to have avoided the trap they laid for him, but that doesn't mean there aren't traps for us. Traps we can fall into and do on a regular basis. How often have we been led to believe that we really do owe to Caesar those things that belong to God? When we found ourselves committed, heart and soul, mind and strength, to things rather than to God's people. The stories of the California wildfires are still coming out, and many, many remain to be told of this terrible time of people who've lost their homes or even their lives. But the one I found the most heartbreaking was the one of the man who lost his life because he couldn't find his keys. There were other people there, family members offering him rides. There was a nephew begging him to go. But he had just bought a brand new, beautiful red truck, and he couldn't bring himself to leave it behind. So he stayed and looked for his keys until it was too late, and he paid for that truck with his life. I think of that nephew and the haunting, complicated legacy of loss he has to bear. The thing is, sometimes we don't know what we will lay down our lives for until we go ahead and do it. It's a tricky business, avoiding the traps. So what is the answer to all those questions about Jesus? Has this encounter answered any of those big questions about him? Is he the Messiah? Will he save people from the oppression of the Roman government? Is he capable of toppling Caesar himself? Is he truly the prophet the people have been waiting for? The answers to these questions are not simple, even for us Christians. We believe Jesus to be the Messiah, but Jesus was killed by the Roman government, by the local representatives of Caesar. Is Jesus capable of toppling Caesar? Is Jesus the one we have been waiting for? I go back to those doves. Together with the coins, they have a story to tell. They tell a tale of a long history of anxious dealings with God and gods, small g. They tell of systems in which people are fighting to justify themselves before deities whom they assume need something from them and will not be satisfied otherwise. But this is Holy Week. Isn't Jesus about to do something brand new? In the name of the God who created humans in God's own image, isn't Jesus about to show us the ultimate demonstration of a God who is not asking us to sacrifice animals or our children's daily bread? Instead, isn't Jesus about to ask us to accept this gift, purely and freely given? Isn't God about to say to humanity through Jesus, I am enough, and therefore you are enough? Isn't God about to show us through Jesus what grace is. God's mercies, fresh every morning, available to us right now and forever. How willing are we to trust Jesus? Not our image of him, but God's image in us. Not our old notions carried along from childhood, but his words and actions. Out with the old systems of sacrifice and money changing. Out with anything that increases the misery of the poor and the most vulnerable. That cannot possibly be from God. It's a trap. Instead, what about this invitation? Give to God what is God's. Aren't we invited, heart and soul, mind and strength, to recognize that we are already one with the God who wants us to know that we are already his? Are we ready to listen to Jesus and be amazed? Thanks be to God. Amen.